The next chapter we're going to be looking at in our civics unit is the judicial branch. In this chapter, we want to look at really trying to answer at least three essential questions. Number one, we want to know how the Constitution of the United States guarantees equal justice for all citizens. Also, we want to look at how judges get appointed to federal courts and how the federal court system is organized, how cases move up through the federal court system. And finally, we're going to take a look at the Supreme Court, figure out what role they play in the U.S. government and the judicial system, and we're going to look at some landmark cases and decide and learn how they reach the Supreme Court. Now, looking at this chapter, we're going to primarily deal with four types of law: statutory law, common law, administrative law, and constitutional law. There are other types, but we're going to concentrate on these four. Let's give a brief overview of statutory law. Bottom line with those is that statutory laws are laws that are passed by lawmaking bodies. They could be Congress, it could be state governments, local governments, town council, doesn't matter, lawmaking bodies. And the types of laws that they pass are things like, examples would be you have to have so many exits, so many fire exits in a building. Tires, your car can only be so big, it only have a certain amount of tires. If you build a new building, you have to use certain types of light bulbs. Another example of a statutory law would be curfews. The town council says that it's a statute that you must be in by 10 o'clock. Also, you have other laws like wheelchair accessibility and things of that nature. Statutory laws can be passed by both the federal, state, and local governments, and they can cover a wide range of things. But primarily, they tend to deal with things that we do in everyday life and apply to all of us, no matter what walk of life we come from. After statutory laws, we have common law. Now, common law is the one that's going to make the most sense to us because it just makes sense. It comes from something called a precedent. A precedent is a previous judicial decision. If a judge rules one way, chances are that if there's a similar case that comes up like it in the future, he will rule in a similar way based on that previous case. If you're ever charged with a crime, your lawyer, if he's a good lawyer, he'll look at some legal books and he'll try to find a case that's similar to yours and find out how the judge ruled on that case, and he'll try to argue that the judge should rule in your favor based on that case. Also, common law can come from custom and tradition. For example, if a man and a woman live together for so long, they're considered common law spouses. A lot of common laws are just based on the way things have always been for the most part. Administrative law, a little different. They're laws that are made by government agencies, different than statutory law, where it's made by lawmaking bodies. These are government agencies, things like regulatory commissions that we studied in the executive branch. The Federal Communications Commission, being a regulatory commission, establishes laws for what you can and can't say on television and the radio. For example, Howard Stern used to be on regular radio, now has gone to Sirius satellite radio, because you can get away with a lot more there. He doesn't have to deal with fines. He doesn't have to deal with the government as much as he does when he was on regular radio and dealt with the FCC. Also, television. The FCC governs what you can say on television, what can be shown at certain times, what kind of ratings the shows have. Depends on the content. Those are types of administrative laws. Also, you have other regulatory commissions like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It says what factories can and can't do as far as polluting. They get monitored. If they pollute so much, they get shut down, they can get fined. And again, administrative law is something that are laws that are made by government agencies and are enforced by law. Next, we have constitutional law. Pretty much the easiest to understand. Those are laws based on the Constitution. Now, those laws can sometimes get a bit fuzzy. If there's a law that conflicts with the Constitution, you could actually sue the federal government and it would be interpreted by the Supreme Court. Laws get interpreted and the federal government decides whether or not those laws are constitutional or not. Now, I put the Health Care Act, the Obamacare picture over here on the right because it's a very interesting case that the Supreme Court is going to take up this summer and decide whether or not the health care law that was passed in 2010 is in fact constitutional. That'll be very, very interesting for those of us that like that kind of stuff, but it'll be interesting to see whether or not certain elements of that are unconstitutional, and if so, what will happen? Will the whole bill be struck down? or will only certain parts of it be struck down? But again, that's what the Supreme Court does. They have the power of judicial review, and they have original jurisdiction over laws that deal with the Constitution. Next section we want to talk about are your rights. What are the rights of the accused? What rights do you have under the Constitution in the United States? So if you are accused of a crime, if you happen to find yourself in that unfortunate circumstance, our laws are set up to protect you. They're set up to protect you from wrongful persecution by the U.S. government, state government, or even local government. One of the most important rights that we all have is the right to an attorney. Now, you do have the right to represent yourself if you're accused of a crime, but it's highly recommended that you don't do that. You're not an expert in the law. You haven't been trained as a lawyer. Everyone wants an attorney. And if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed to you by the court. Also, all suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And that's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, you have to completely convince a jury that you are guilty. Those people have to unanimously decide that you have committed that crime. Also, you have the right to bail. If you are accused of a crime, you're put on trial, you have a right to post bail. And pending your conviction or even pending your trial, you'll be released and you'll be able to walk around in public just like anybody else. Now, bail can be denied to you if you are a dangerous person, if you committed an extremely violent act, or if you're a danger to yourself or others. Bail can be denied, but it usually isn't. And bail is usually commensurate with the crime that was committed, meaning if your crime was less severe, your bail's not going to be as high. But if you're accused of a pretty serious crime, then your bail will be set a lot higher. Also, before you get indicted by a grand jury, evidence must be presented to a judge in order to indict you. In order to charge you with a crime, there has to be evidence that you may have committed that crime. Without evidence, no indictment. As the accused, you're also entitled to a trial by a jury of your peers. 12 people from the community sit in judgment of you, and they will decide whether or not you broke the law. You also have the right to hear and question witnesses in a trial, and you do have the right not to testify against yourself. You don't have to say anything, and the jury can't hold that against you. And the last right we're going to deal with is the right to appeal. If you are convicted, you have the right to appeal your conviction to a higher court. That a higher court could uphold your conviction, they could give you a new trial, or they could overturn your conviction. There's a number of things that they can do, but you do have the right to appeal, and the highest court that you could appeal to is the Supreme Court. Now, they don't necessarily hear all appeals, but they do hear some, and once your appeal goes to the Supreme Court, you can go no higher. If they uphold your conviction, you're staying in jail. And that's all we have.